Read streaming.
I haven't had.
If you could give me a mic test real quick.
Hello. It's like the thing's ringing in my ear.
If you could give me a mic
Can you
test
hear
real
me?
quick. Yep, I hear you just fine.
All right.
Okay. We're here with Jedi West. Jedi West, we're going to talk about the building of a Star Wars party and how a GM and the players can make best use of the different archetypes that Fantasy Flight has given us to work with in creating our parties. Where do we start?
Well, I guess start with Edge of the Empire since it was the first game line out. I mean, you've got your combat specs from the hired gun and the bounty hunter. Those are your combat heavy specs. But even within those, there's others like the. Actually, it's within within each career. They usually do a pretty good job of spreading it out. Like there can be a face character within each career. There can be a really combat heavy character, and there can be a good support character within each career. Because at this point, for Edge of the Empire, the Bounty Hunter book's getting ready to drop here, I think pretty soon. So you'll have 6 specializations for each of the careers that are out there, and each one of them is going to have a slightly different feel from the others.
So by that what
talents.
does that mean? What do the specializations? How do they differ? What do they offer? How do they vary?
Okay, well, I mean, within the Politico, you have the Doctor, which is a support healing character. You have, actually, let me grab my book because I want to. Actually, it's not the Politico; it's the Colonist. Within the Colonist, you've got 6 specializations to choose from. Um, so, just go to the core rule book real quick. Colonist, you have the Doctor, which is, like I said before, is your support healer. You've got the Politico, which can be a face character. Can also be just a really good support character for other
Don't
players.
underestimate Scathing Tirade.
Oh no, or inspiring rhetoric. Don't
Mm-hmm.
underestimate either one of those talents. There's also the Scholar. The Scholar is probably one of the most overlooked, I think, support classes. Uh, this is the person, this is the university professor that, they, to quote Tyrion Lannister, they drink and they know things. Mostly they know things. Drinking's optional. And then within the Far Horizons book, which is the support book for it, uh, you've got 3 specializations. You've got the Entrepreneur, which is all about credits and making money for your group. They also have a few talents. They also know things, or they know a guy who knows things. Then you have the Marshal, which is actually a combat class or combat spec. And then you have the Performer, which is probably one of the most interesting, I think, support classes
Mm-hmm.
if you get somebody who can play it right.
Yeah, I want to play Sice Noodles.
But so each one has their own have different specializations that'll take you down a little bit different path and give you a little bit different flavor. And then, I mean, even if you have 2 marshals or you had 2 2 scholars in your group, a lot of those specializations like that can go in vastly different directions depending on talent selection and skill selection.
So what's the advantage of playing a colonist in there? I mean, you think about those archetypes that doesn't fit Luke, Han, Chewie, Princess Leia
Well,
on
actually,
there.
I would actually argue Luke might have had some ranks of. Well, no, Luke wouldn't have had colonists. Trying to think who would have had colonists. Lando Calrissian could have had Politico
Mm-hmm.
very easily. Um, let's see
But
what
he
other
also
characters
has.
we got.
But what we know him best for is his
Being a smuggler or a charmer, but yeah,
smuggler
I
and
could.
flying the Falcon.
Yeah, but I mean, but when we're first introduced to him, he's Baron Administrator of Cloud City.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that he's probably got multiple specs. He's probably if I were to build him, I would probably start out with either entrepreneur or with either a colonist or a smuggler. I would definitely, if I started out smuggler, I would probably go scoundrel. If I went colonist, I would probably go entrepreneur there, and then I would start branching out. I would definitely give him stuff out of the entrepreneur tree. I would give him talents out of scoundrel, charmer, uh, because he's always schmoozing. So I mean, I could see him in all four of those specializations.
Hmm. So how do you make a character like that useful in the general Star Wars style story? How are they not just kept on the sidelines until they need to negotiate something or buy something?
Well, one of the things I do with people who are playing face characters is usually with my group, if they're playing a face character, uh, they try to make sure that they are the ones talking when they go to do a negotiation. If it's obvious that in my current game I have a character, um, guys playing a character based off of Anastasia, the lost Russian heir, but his character is always very well dressed, carries herself with with an air of importance, and so when they go to talk to people, because his character's always acting like that, my NPCs always start looking to that person. This person's important. They're obviously the one that's probably going to talk to me, or they have the money. So this is who I want to butter up. And the biggest thing is, don't make a one trick. If you make a one trick pony, then that's all you're going to be. If you make a character that's designed to just be, amazing at negotiation and nothing else, then that's really all you're going to do is be, you know, hey, we need to go on a shopping trip. Come over here and get the guy to give us a discount.
With the tools available for character creation in Fantasy Flight Star Wars, how much flexibility do you have to avoid the one trick pony, but still have a character that is useful in his character in his specialization?
Oh, I think it's very easy, especially if you go to the good old standby human. Humans at character creation, they get to pick after you've created your character and picked all your career skills and everything. You get to pick two skills that are not career skills and give yourself a rank in each one of them. So if you want to play that, colonist doctor, or you want to play that politico, but you don't want to be, just relying on your raw agility characteristic for your ranged light or ranged heavy, then go ahead and give yourself a rank in one of those skills so that you can bump up and get that upgrade to your proficiency dice over just the ability die.
How do you advise people for choosing that? Do you advise them just, hey, it's Star Wars, you're gonna be shooting stormtroopers, you might as well take a ranged light, or do you try to get them in a different way to figure out their diverse
Work it.
skills?
I like them to work it into their backstory, but let's face it. I mean, every time you go to a starport and your characters are if it's Edge of the Empire, they're not they're on the shady side of business anyway. And how many people did you see walking around Mos Eisley that didn't have a blaster or a knife, some sort of weapon on them for self-defense.
Was gonna say a Jawa, but that only seems to be useful against droids.
I mean, they've got that bandolier. You don't know what they could be carrying in that bandolier. I mean, they could have
Oh,
10
that would be great
knives.
if those are all grenades.
I mean, I would be afraid to mess with a Jawa. Just saying. They're short. You forget they're there, and then they knife you in the kidney.
Can you play a Jawa yet in Edge of the Empire?
There's a homebrew. There's a homebrew PDF out there, the unofficial species menagerie, and they're in that, but there has not been an official release from Fantasy Flight yet.
Oh, okay.
For species stats.
Because everybody just loves yelling Utini, you know.
And that is actually one of the talents in the in one of the mechanic talent trees, I believe, is Utini.
So how do you get a party to be balanced? What does it take when you have a whole group of players sitting down to create their characters? Do you help guide them to create a balanced party? Are there things that you use or look for a balanced party, or do you just say screw it, do whatever you want?
Honestly, I don't try to guide anybody towards anything. I'll let them play what they want to play. Uh, the games that I run at my local FLGS, I've usually got one or two players that after everybody's started making their characters, they're like, okay, do we have a face character? No, okay, I'll play the face character. Or do we have somebody who can patch us up after we get stomped into the ground? Okay, I'll play a doctor or I'll play a medic or whatever. So usually I have players that they're willing to play, try to go into a specific role if that role's not been filled.
What are the specific archetypes that are the musts of a Star Wars party? Like you have cleric, wizard, rogue, wizard in D&D. What is the quintessential archetype role for a Star Wars party?
Well, I mean, if you want to go back to the classic trilogy, I mean, you've got Han's a smuggler. He is kind of a face character. He knows how to handle himself in a fight. Chewbacca would probably be the closest thing you would have to a fighter. But he's also the mechanic. He's also the guy fixing the ship when it gets torn up. So there's not really, to my mind, there's not really a specific. This is the quintessential build for party. I've played in games where there's been Jedi, and I've run games with Jedi, I've run games with non-Jedi, and really it all boils down to how smart the players play it. If they don't have someone who can patch them up, they learn really quickly. Don't kick in the door and shoot everything immediately. But I'm usually fairly forgiving with combat, and the FFG system's actually fairly forgiving with character death.
It's
as well.
so hard. It seems hard to die in this game.
It can be really hard to die in the game. For rivals and nemesis, I use the same rules that I use for players, which is in order to have permanent character death, you have to roll above 150 on the crit chart. And the way I run it is, you go to your wound threshold, you're still up. If you go one past it, you go unconscious, and you take an immediate critical hit. Once you get to double your wound threshold, you stop taking wound damage, but every single attack against you just gives another crit. Automatically. They don't have to roll to crit you. They just crit you automatically. And those stack fast because every single crit adds a plus 10 to the next roll.
Is that a homebrew, or is that an interpretation of how they've written it?
That's my interpretation of how to do it. Again, like I said, I'm kind of forgiving when it comes to the games, because a lot of my games I run at the local gaming store, so I'm trying to help the proprietor or help the owner get people interested in the game.
The one thing on the crit table that bugs me the most is how hard it is to sever somebody's hand. With how much we see that happen in the movie, it just seems so difficult to sever.
I do it all the time.
You
I do
do
it
it
all
all.
the time.
Then yeah, I am rolling like crap. It's like in D&D on Wednesday night, I had a party go up against 13 frost giants and 2 winter wolves, and I couldn't kill a single PC. I just
Well,
lost it on the dice.
part of it though also is uh, your interpretation of it, like maimed or crippled. That could be that the limb is severed, or it's just so mangled that it's useless now. Because there's one of them, I think it's it's maimed, I think, where it permanently reduces that characteristic by one.
Mm.
Curing the crit doesn't fix it. It's a permanent reduction. So the only way to get that back is to get a cybernetic replacement.
How
So
high often in your games have you been going up there into maimed level of type of critical injuries?
this particular campaign, I've done it to two characters have been maimed. One was maimed very early in the campaign, and the other was maimed very late, just a few weeks ago.
What do you think it offers, that system of wound points and the critical hit effects? What does that offer, do you think, to the game?
It'll limit, even if they don't have, or even if they do have a like a doctor or a healer. It really makes them think about taking cover or just hiding, for that matter, and not just standing out in the open and getting shot repeatedly, because your wounds are so low and weapons do a lot of damage. I mean, a completely, the lightsaber in the Edge of the Empire core rulebook does a base 10 damage. The lightsabers you can build yourself from Force and Destiny, they start out at 6, but you can get them up to where they're doing a base 14 damage.
Whoa.
And it's breach 1, which means it ignores 10 points of soak. So it is literally a one-hit kill weapon if you roll well enough. I mean, you drop somebody in one hit, it's done. It's like it's in the movies. Luke swings that thing, hits a guy, he goes down. He doesn't get back up. He's down.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to this thing, because this is what kept me off of Star Wars after doing my Threat Detected game. The Jedi just got so dang powerful that it was the Jedi show, and our smuggler was crazy enough and took enough of the feats to be very lethal in with his blaster pistol. And beyond that, everybody else seemed to be taking a backseat to these characters.
Mm.
How does Fantasy Flight balance out the fighters and the Jedi with the other characters so that it's not like you feel like, well, I might as well just go over here and let the Jedi and the gunslinger do his thing?
Yeah. Because the nature of the system, you earn XP each session, and then you have to decide how you're going to spend that XP. Are you going to increase your skill to make yourself be more effective in combat and hit more often and do maybe a little bit more damage? Or are you going to buy a talent that'll give you an upgrade or allow you to do some trick in combat? So and then on top of that, you've got to decide, how much mastery of the Force do I really want? Do I want to be, if I'm going to play the Jedi, do I want to be a saber slinger that cuts everything up with my lightsaber, or do I want to be the guy who has mastery of the Force and can do a lot of those tricks, like move, throwing things around, or Force lightning if you're going to go down the dark side path, that sort of thing. You've got to make a choice, because you have to spend XP to buy each one of those things, and if you sink all your XP into Force powers, well, you're not really going to be hitting in combat that well, because you spent your XP on buying a Force power or upgrading it versus making yourself more effective in combat. With the D20 system, it was very much, okay, I gained a level and I get this and this and this and this and this. I get better at combat, I get more hit points, I get the, you just get all this stuff. With the Fantasy Flight system, you really have to pick and choose and decide, what do you want to do? And the other thing is, in combat, like the Politico, you said scathing tirade and inspiring rhetoric. Those two things, you know, yeah, it kind of makes you sound like you're being a cheerleader in the background, but not really. I mean, it's kind of like Watto. Watto was insulting people half the time when you see him in episode one. So I mean, it's you're doing the same thing. You're demoralizing them. You're calling them names, pointing out flaws in their uh, tactics or whatever, and allowing your allies to exploit that flaw. So,
So from a GM's point of view, how do you structure an adventure so that you can involve everybody? What kinds of scenes make Star Wars that use the best use of diverse party?
uh, some of the modules have done a really good job. Uh, my own personal experience, though, know your players' talents. Know what talents they have. Uh, if you can get something like get Obsidian Portal, and make it a requirement as part of the game that your players keep their character sheets updated. That way you know what skills they have, what skills they're trained in. You know what ranks they have in it. You know what talents they have and what those talents do. Uh, Give them the opportunity to use those things. If they bought talents that allow them to remove setback dice, give them give them challenges where those setback dice are going to come into play, and they can be like, haha, I could ignore I could ignore this and make the roll. That way they feel like they've spent their XP on something worthwhile. Also, like I said, you know what their skill ranks are at. That way you can tailor the adversaries and the challenges to where, or obstacles to where it seems to where they're being challenged, but it's not impossible. I mean, I've gone into games where they're like, and you have to make this check, and I'm like, well, there is a chance that I can do that, but it's very, very slim that that's going to happen.
One of the fun things that in the Firefly one of the source books for it they had was the advice of to build a group of adversaries that is the mirror opposite of each of the players, so that each of them has an adversary that has their same abilities and things, but is just a little bit darker, so everybody has their personal, I don't like that guy, he reminds me too much of me.
Yeah. That's one good way. Another thing for players, invest in your character's backstory. I mean, if you're the kind of player that you're just going to the game to hang out and socialize with your friends, that's great. But a lot of people get really involved in their characters' backstories. Case in point, the current campaign I'm running, one of the player that's playing the Anastasia type of character, turned, I had them do like a Dresden Files type character creation where they had to, or a Fate style where they had to write about their characters back, history for 3, and then they had to hand the paper to somebody else and make a connection there and hand it again and make another connection. So, so that was the reason this group is together. I didn't have to do that part. It didn't matter. It was all good. And by the end of it, everybody had read everyone else's backstory, and they understood what their characters were supposed to be doing, where this person came from, what they were doing, what their goals were. And then after that, the guy who's playing the Anastasia type character, he turned in a 3.5 page backstory to me with and then a list of possible NPC names. So I mean, he handed me this giant batch of cannon fodder to play with.
Not just gave you a couple yards of rope to hang him with, but gave a couple parsecs worth of.
He gave me a loom worth of fabric to do something with. I mean, it was great. I love that when players will do that for me. Just here's here's the goal. Here's kind of where I see my character going. Lays that thing out, and then I can sit there and I can be like, well, I like this idea, so this is how I'm gonna incorporate that. This idea, not so much. It doesn't fit. So, I mean, you don't give them everything they ask for, but you give them a lot of good plot hooks, and throw those plot hooks out and see how they react to them.
How about the mysteries? It seems all the good characters in Star Wars, especially Episode 7, has some kind of mystery to their past and things like that. Do you have when you do your Dresden Files thing? Do you have a way of going into a hook about something that's mysterious about their past
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
they're perfectly. It's what they want to put in there. Um, if they put in that there was, it's obvious that the way the person reacts to certain environments or certain cues, that something tragic has happened in their past, but they don't talk about it. Then that's something that the other players can get involved in. A lot of times, I'll pull that person aside and be like, okay, do you have you don't have to tell me what it is, but do you have an idea of what this event was that shaped your character so much? And if they say yes, then I'm like, all right, if you want to share that with me, you can, and we can work it out and work it into the game. I will give them that heads up. I said, or if you don't, then let's talk about this and figure out what it was, and see how it's gonna to affect the game. Because those kind of, and then they don't know when they might know that it's gonna come, but they don't know exactly when that shoe's gonna drop. And then when it all drops in front of the rest of the party,
When the Wookiee runs into his uncle, who is a slaver and things, and Wookiee walked away from the business, and
or I don't think I couldn't see a Wookiee being a slaver. If it was a Wookiee character, I could see, the Wookiee running into the slaver that had taken his uncle. And then maybe you're running an alliance style. Right? If you're running, oh, that's a really good one. Age of Rebellion. You're running if you have a Wookiee in the party, and that part of his backstory is his uncle was taken by a slaver. He gets called in for a mission, and the alliance is like, all right, we've got an end for this area. We need you to infiltrate. Here's your contact, and then have that guy walk in. This is the guy that's got to get you all into the Imperial site that you're infiltrating. He's working with the Alliance at this point. So what's the deal? Has he changed his ways? Is the Wookiee even going to care if he's changed his ways? Is he going to work with him until he gets to the point where he can, it's like, okay, we're finished with the job, awesome, and then he pulls the bowcaster out and shoots the guy square in the face, in the chest or something. What is their reaction going to be? Actually, in the current campaign I'm in, I've got a character who he's playing the doctor. He's playing a Chiss, and his character has an absolute hatred for the Empire, to the point where in one of the sessions, there was a wounded or stunned stormtrooper laying on the ground, and he walked up and was like, okay, I guess I'll work on this guy. And he kneels down next to him, and I just slid him a thing across there. I said, "Are you going to even hide the fact of what you're about to do?" Because I mean, he'd slid a piece of paper to me, and it's like, I'm taking the scalpel and I'm shoving it right up under the helmet, and I'm slitting the guy's throat. And I passed it back. I said, "Are you even going to hide the fact that you're doing this?" And he passed it back and said, "No." And I was like, "Okay, there's two people standing there." I was like, "You see him kneel down, and he's not pulling out the stem injector. He's pulling out that big scalpel, and it looks like he's getting ready to stab the guy." And they grabbed him and pulled him off. He's like, "No, you can't kill him." So there's always, and every time stormtroopers show up, everybody in the group just kind of stops and turns and looks like, they're gonna flip out and try to kill somebody now, or
How about in space battles? I know that Order 66 has talked about this a bit. How do you keep everybody involved once it's in space? How do you avoid it to where it's not there's the mechanic and the pilot flying, and then you have Leia putting a blanket over Luke as he cries at the game table.
Uh, well, like, look to the player's talents. If not, if I try to avoid space combat, if there's only like one or two people that are geared towards it at all, I try to avoid it. I don't completely leave it out because it is such a part of Star Wars that I don't think you can just absolutely leave it out. Um, but if there's only one or two players out of a even out of a party of four, if there's only two players that are even geared towards space combat, then I would probably do very little space combat.
Because even Luke didn't was pretty effective with the gunnery
Oh
on
yeah,
the Falcon. He
and
didn't have any training on that thing.
nope. And that's the thing. I've had in games, I've actually had people say, well, I don't have the gunnery skill. Like, you've got an agility. Your character has an agility of 4. He's not gonna be, he's not gonna be terrible at it. He gets to roll 4 ability dice, and he can do a ton of damage if he gets a hit.
And you can spend destiny points to
You know,
upgrade.
you can spend destiny points to upgrade if you've got the right. If you've bought the right if you've bought the right add-ons and upgrades for your ship, you can get upgrades as well. For that, there's targeting computers that you can buy to make yourself better at it. So, you know, if you've got an agility of 2 or higher, you can shoot it. You probably halfway decent at shooting a gun. I mean, your characteristics cap at 6. I think the only way you can get higher than a 6 is to buy all the way up to 6 and then have someone somehow get a cybernetic enhancement. That's the only way you can get a 7, is to get a cybernetic enhancement. So, 6 is the cap. If you've got a 2 or a higher in the base characteristic for combat skill, you're not going to be terrible at it. 2 is basically your average.
Okay.
So, the other thing is, with those politicos, I actually had one guy at a con be like, "Well, I'm like a negotiator or a politico. What am I going to do in space combat?" I'm like, "You have leadership. You've got a lot of ranks in leadership. You can do fire discipline. You can do inspiring rhetoric. You can do
scathing tirade over the comms.
You could do scathing tirade over the comms. I mean, I'll give you a couple of rounds of that. After a while, they're going to turn the comm off so they don't have to listen to you insult them. But you might get a round or two in there to give them some setback dice and stuff. But the other thing is I'll sit there and give advice, like, you could try this, you could do this, so that they can and get them thinking outside the box. That's the other thing that I run into running games at the local shop. I get a lot of new players, so they are coming from that D20 mindset of, well, if I don't have proficiency with it, then I'm not going to be any good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to get them thinking outside that box.
There are so many tools that can boost them.
Yep. I mean, even think about look at. I mean, a lot of people. I know a lot of people hate this movie. I'm not a huge fan of it, but Phantom Menace. 9-year-old kid climbs in the cockpit of a starfighter, and gets lucky.
Was it luck?
No, it was plot. Well, it was plot luck. But I mean, he was not a. He'd flown ground vehicles. He'd never flown a spaceship.
How would you have built Anakin at that point for what he did?
There's not a lot. There's not a lot of XP spent there. Again, that was one of those where, when the GM gave him the difficulties, he rolled on the difficulty dice. There was a lot of blanks that were rolled, and he just rolled some successes.
And there was a triumph.
And there was a triumph in there at least once. Yeah.
While we're talking builds for the main characters of Episode 7, for Finn and for Rey, how would you, using the Fantasy Flight systems, how would you build them?
How would I? Finn's easy. He's straight soldier or hired gun. That's you pick which one you're gonna do. Most likely, I would do one of the soldiers' uh, specializations and run down that tree. Ray, that's more difficult. I might go. What is it? There's one. I think there's a Fringer spec in Edge of the Empire. Let me look here real quick.
She's also a melee.
Yeah,
She's also a melee monster.
the Explorer. Yeah, I'd probably give her ranks in the Explorer Fringer tree. It's got some stuff in there. It's got some stuff in there that would fit with her. Either that, or I might even give her ranks in Technician and Mechanic, because Mechanics get Brawl. Well, that's the other thing. It doesn't matter what skills you have on your career list. You can buy non-career skills. You can
Right.
spend
I was
that
just thinking that she would have some talents that would enhance her melee with how good she is with that staff.
possibly. The Fringer actually gets a lot of skills like the kip up. They can do the kip. If they're laying on their back, they can just do where they throw their legs and just stand back up. They can do the kip. I think they get kip up or jump up as a talent. A few other things like that. Maybe Marauder, because Marauder gets a lot of melee things.
I could see that.
Maybe I might give her one of the ones out of Force and Destiny, but I doubt it. I don't see her. I don't see. I would see her being more an Edge of the Empire spec with the Force sensitive emergent talent tree out of Age of Rebellion.
So she's definitely not a starting character.
No, none of those people. None of them in that were starting characters. I mean, Poe is easily. If I was going to build Poe, he's an ace pilot and hotshot, and that's it.
He's the equivalent of Wedge.
That's the two trees, that I would give him, and I'd pretty much stick to those, and you're done. So yeah, that I try to avoid building. I like to come up with what trees would we pick them, but I don't build. I don't put skill. I don't do stats. I don't do full stats. I would say they might have this, or this, but
I just was doing this exercise because I wanted to show how flexible the different classes and specs are for the Fantasy Flight System throughout the 3 different books to show that it can handle all these different situations.
Oh yeah, it can pretty much handle any situation you want to throw at it, and that's the thing. Building. Might cover this in a different one, but when you're building your NPCs, what do they have? Whatever you think they need to have to make it a challenge for your players. There's not a huge set list of you have to do these steps in order to get this done. It's like, no, you pick this, and this, and run with it, and you're good.
Cool. And let's wrap up. Final thoughts on putting together a Star Wars party, selecting your team, and as a GM, and from the player side.
Okay, biggest thing I say: know your players, know their play style, so that you can tailor it to them. 2, give them a hint as to what they're doing, what they're going to be doing. Give them when you're getting ready, when you're setting down to start the campaign and have them create characters. Give them the elevator pitch. Give them the elevator pitch for what your game is going to be. Are we doing political intrigue? Is it gonna be political intrigue heavy? Is there gonna be? Do you want to do a lot of starship combat? Do you there has to be that back and forth in order to have a successful game. So, give them an idea of what you're wanting to run. If they bucket that, then maybe you need to change the style. I mean, because if you said, "We're going to do political intrigue," and everybody's like, "But I wanted to play a soldier, and I wanted to play
I want to fly an
this
X-wing.
I want to fly an X-wing. Well, I don't want to fly an X-wing. I want to, fly the Millennium Falcon." It's like, okay, guys, that's why I think the Fate character creation method of having them write stories before they put pen to paper or pencil to paper and put stats down is probably one of the best things you can do. I
I
mean, even
can't.
if you
No
don't
argument here.
even if you don't do the full Fate creation method, I mean, even if you just say, okay, guys, here's a list of questions. If you want to do just 3 or 4 questions, just do 3 or 4 questions to give you as the GM an idea of what they're looking to get out of the game. And also the questions will kind of frame it to them as what you're wanting to do with the game. And then have them share their answers at the table. They don't have to read it out loud. They can pass it around and let everybody else read it. But, have them share their answers at the table. That way, everybody understands what the GM wants or what the GM is hoping to do, and what the other players at the table are hoping to get out of the experience as well. Because if you don't have that, then you might as well just pack up the RPG books, put them on the shelf, and get out a board game and play that.
But if a character builds some things with some secrets in there, like that they killed their former commanding officer
Oh
because
yeah,
he was kind of things, would you let them not say that and let that come out in role playing
yeah,
in a future thing?
yeah. I mean, if it's a like defining moment that you want to keep as a surprise for down the road, yes, that's perfectly fine. But you know, give me an idea what you're playing. You're playing a grizzled veteran soldier. Okay, I can understand that concept and I can fly with that. I can write all day for that character archetype. Or if you're playing, we'll stick with the soldier thing. You're playing the rookie recruit who's completely, green and wet behind the ears. If you've got those two archetypes in the thing, then you know that automatically gives a hook and a stick for those two characters. The guy who's green could constantly be asking advice of the other one, and the other one could be like, "Just shut up and do your job."
You've got a comedy team right there.
Exactly. I mean, or it doesn't have to be comedy. It could be the older guy really actually is interested in helping the younger guy, and he's going to take him under his wing and teach him, this is how you do your job. This is how you are effective in this profession.
Excellent.
So I mean, that again, that gives them hooks and how they're. It could also be that maybe that grizzled veteran soldier is the uncle or a friend of that guy's father. So I mean, you've got however they want to work it. I mean, they can work all that out, and that gives your party more cohesion and gives an understanding as to how the party's supposed to work together.
Or will eventually betray the party.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jedi West, for talking about character creation, not character creation, but party creation in Fantasy Flight Star Wars.
Always welcome.